August 1962, a record called Sherry became an overnight million-selling #1 hit. One of 21 million sellers that year by a recording group that had not one, but 2 million-selling hits. The only such musical unit, group or otherwise, to do so in 1962. The recording group was the Four Seasons: Frankie Valli, Bob Gaudio, Tommy DeVito, and Nick Massey. But the story of the Four Seasons begins long before August 1962, and the golden era of the Four Seasons stretches a decade in a fickle rock music business where most record makers never get beyond 1 or 2 million-selling hits. With us now are the Four Seasons: organist Bob Gaudio, bass Joe Long, the newest season Dimitri Callis, and through a telephone hookup, leader Frankie Valli, resting and recuperating from a recent hospital visit. We'll be talking with the Seasons during the next 6 hours and hear all of their hit records. Our thanks to Mr. Steve Kirk and Mr. Pat Welch for their assistance and cooperation in the production of this documentary. The Four Seasons have sold over 85 million records, more than any other American recording group. They have been together since the mid-1950s, again longer and more consistent than any other group in the world. In this first hour, we'll see the origins of the group, their early struggles, the initial successes and consistent hits through 1963. The group originated in the 1950s with Frankie Valli, who always had the desire to sing, and with 3 friends did so in many dingy, smoke-filled nightclubs in the many industrial New Jersey cities where the guys grew up. Frankie remembers most about the early struggling years.
Yes, for as long as I can remember, the early years were, a lot of fun. There were a lot of very pleasant things come to my mind, but
just when and how did they get together?
Well, they started sometime in around the middle of the 50s. And Tom DeVito was in it. He had a brother, Nick. He was in it. There was a fellow named Hank Majeski. We knew each other, and we had worked in a particular string of clubs. We just decided to put a group together.
We'll have the other guys comment on the Four Lovers in a minute, but while we have you, Frankie, did you do a record called This Is Real? And when was this, and how did it come about?
Yes, that was a demo that I had done to work for publishers. And when they had new songs, or writers wrote new songs, they wanted somebody to sing so they could show get good singers.
Right.
So in the very early days, when not too much was happening, and I needed to make money somewhere, that's what I did. So it must have been like 51, 52.
Frankie, did you ever think during those early years that you'd never be as popular as you are and that you were?
I don't think anybody ever really feels that. And I don't think anybody ever, even after it happened, I think it's something that happens to you, but, to actually say that you felt it is a very difficult thing. That you felt it was going to happen. But I don't know what it feels like. There's no particular feeling to it.
Thank you, Frankie. Just hold on the line. We'll be talking to you from time to time. Bob, Joe, and Dimitri, was there anything in your childhood or growing up period that gave you any indication of your future success? For example, did a gypsy woman predict success, or perhaps you won in a talent contest?
I won a talent contest. I don't know about it.
Our gypsy women, I guess in each case, was our father. Now, the thing is, we all came from families where the old man said, you must learn a musical instrument, So at the age of 7 years old, I was trudging a 48 bass accordion down the block taking lessons, and he was, all of us. We all, in fact, Bob gave a legitimate recital when he was just a sub-teen, So what happened was, as a result of studying early, we all began to play for people at an early age. I think I worked my first wedding when I was 9 years old. So I think all of us had, music started right from the time we were a little toddler.
Would you say this is true for Frankie, too?
Well, Frankie doesn't play, but his musical background is mostly natural. He just has a voice, and it's there.
What artists or groups did you admire as you grew up?
Yeah, I admired Dave Brubeck, Cannonball Adderley.
Right.
I guess Presley, who else?
I don't know. That's a very difficult thing because, one of the groups specifically that I would say were very impressive to me were the Drifters, because they had so many great things. The other group, the Coasters. Right.
Sure.
I really got into some of the groups that had a track record of consistently coming up with hits as opposed to one hit here and one hit there by some of the other groups. I mean, there were just so many groups at that time, I can't possibly remember two of the names, It's just like...
Right. That was really a golden era. I mean, even as kids, we realized we were listening to some pretty exciting music.
Buddy Holly.
Really, really beautiful time.
Now about the Four Lovers, did they all grow up together, as did all of you around the New Jersey area?
Yeah, it's the original group, which was Frankie Valli and Tom DeVito, they had been together and they had grown up together. The name of the group was changed to the Four Seasons when I joined, and that was in 60, I believe. And we had about 2 years of working locally in nightclubs and so on and so forth. And we did some recording, did some backup work before we actually, in 62, recorded Cherry.
Bob, we know you weren't one of the Four Lovers. Just how did you get together with them?
Well, as I mentioned, Tom DeVito and Frankie were in a group. I was in a group called the Royal Teens. The first hit I had was Short Shorts, which is many, many years ago. And we kind of, met doing TV shows, the two groups. And when I left the Royal Teens, I went with, at that time, the group was called the Four Lovers, and we later changed the name. And Joe's been with us now for 6 years. 6. And Dimitri's brand new. He replaced Tom DeVito about 7 months ago, I believe.
Here's that historical recording, written and sung in part by Bob Gaudio, the Royal Teens and Short Shorts.
Man, dig that crazy chick.
The Royal Teens had several other hits, including Harvey's Got a Girlfriend and Big Name Button. Bob, wasn't Al Cooper the man who later formed Blood, Sweat, and Tears in the group?
Yes, he was, but he doesn't like to say that. That's very strange because I hadn't seen Al in, must have been 4 or 5 years, and I was down at the bitter end in the Village in New York one night, and he was in a little coffee shop, and he had the long hair, and I just didn't recognize him. He came over and he said hello, and I just could not believe it with him. And at that time, I think he had the Blues Project. I've seen him since then, of course, and we kid him quite a bit about it.
Anybody else you remember in the group?
Yeah, 2 policemen, one insurance man, and that's about it.
I understand the group, after struggling in clubs and backup work, as you mentioned, got their big break when you met writer-producer Bob Crew. When and how did this come about?
We just knocked on a lot of doors, and he finally opened one. It's really that simple. Right. Frankie had known him for many years before, because Bob Crew originally was an artist at one point. Frankie had done a couple of shows with him. And we ran into him again when we were looking for a recording deal.
Your first record was on the Garn label, and it was called Bermuda in 1962, right? And what about Spanish Lace?
Yes, it was. That's right. Very good. I forgot all about that. That was, Bermuda was the first single we had out under the Four Seasons. The second one was Sherry. Spanish, I think that was the other side of Bermuda, if I'm not mistaken.
I understand that Bob Crew actually renamed the group the Four Seasons. Is this correct?
Wrong. As a matter of fact, we had a big fight about that. I'll never forget that because Frankie is the one that originated the name. Mm-hmm. And we had, just a hatful of names to pick out of. And finally, Frankie insisted upon the name Four Seasons. And we finally decided to go with it. At that time, the Four Seasons, I don't know, for some reason the name sounded like the Four Aces, the Four Freshmen, and at that time I think birds were very big, and it sounded like a little bit of an old-fashioned name, but fortunately it proved to be something that was not just a yearly thing, every year groups would come out with different names, and that one just seemed to hang on.
It's a name you can grow old with, and nobody's going to say, ha, Four Seasons, what a silly guy doing with a name like that. It's a timeless name.
We are sure that the group name came from the name of a restaurant in New Jersey where the guys happened to be playing one night in the early 60s. Bob, when did the deal with VJ Records transpire?
Well, we had gone in with Bob Crew and recorded the master of Sherry, and he put up the money. And after it was done, we all realized that we had something that sounded pretty strong. Mm-hmm. So he went around to a few record companies and finally got the best offer from DJ for the single.
Now the smash hit of Sherry was your first million seller. What do you remember about it?
It almost wasn't recorded. That's a pretty strange story. That was written about 10 minutes before rehearsal. And the only way at that time I could remember melodies was if I had a lyric to them. So I wrote the quickest thing I could think of. And just jotted it down, brought it to rehearsal, and I sang for the rest of the guys, and two of them liked it, and one of them didn't, it was that kind of a thing. And we went back and forth and rehearsed, and we were only supposed to record four songs on the date, and this was the fifth. So it was a matter of choosing between one of the other ones. One had to go, and we just couldn't come to a decision. So we called up Bob, and he heard all the things. We sang Sherry over the phone. He said, wow, that really sounds like a winner. So he said, I think maybe we could afford to do 5 instead of 4. And we put it on the date.
What a monster record. Frankie, what was your reaction when that became an overnight hit?
Well, I was thrilled about the fact that I had a hit record. I could hardly believe it, but I was thrilled.
At one point, it sold an unbelievable 180,000 copies in one day. Is that true?
Yeah, that was. It shocked us. In fact, I think it was like the 5th or 6th day it was out. And we heard that, and we thought maybe 18,000, but not 180.
Did Bob Crew change the sound of the group for Sherry?
No, it was more of a direction situation, we were totally unfamiliar with recording procedures and, knew from nothing about studios.
Sure.
Except for what, backgrounds we had done up until that point. Mm-hmm. And he directed the whole thing. Again, when I mentioned before about we were only going to do 4 songs.
Right.
He made the decision to do the 5th one, which was Sherry, because we were in a deadlock. So I'd say that was a pretty important maneuver.
What was the feeling of the group while they waited for the record to climb the charts?
It all happened so fast. There really wasn't any waiting. It was out about a week, and it was, it was in the top 10. I couldn't believe it. And everything happened so fast that we just didn't know what hit us. Now, one jockey I remember, I can't remember his name now, but I remember it was in Philadelphia, and he had played it for a half hour straight, and he lost his job.
His name is
But he's on
Frankie
our
Valli.
he's on our payroll now, though.
The second release for VJ was Big Girls Don't Cry in October 1962. Was that done at the time of Sherry?
No. The only thing that I could... No, Big Girls Don't Cry was done separately. Walk Like a Man was on the same session.
Oh, I see.
That was quite a panic as to what came out first. You know, we just didn't. It was a very tough decision. Other than the fact that it was a hit. No, not too many things. That was Bob Crew's title. I remember that. He called me up one about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning.
Really?
And said I wish I could remember the name of the flick that it was in, but somebody had said it in a line in a movie, and, you know, rang the bell, and you know, the next day we wrote it.
Wow.
Somebody like that. I can't remember who it was.
How did it feel to have 2 number ones in a row? The first group to do so since the Everly Brothers in the 50s.
Yeah, you know, when you have 2 number ones in a row, in fact, they were both in the top 10 at the same time. One was coming down and one was going up. You just feel like that you can do no wrong.
Teeter
We said, wow, we're going to be here forever.
Do you think you could continue to produce hits?
Well, I think I kind of said that before, didn't I? You know, once we got started, there was just, you know, you feel like there's no way you can ever stop.
And there certainly wasn't. The third smash hit was released, as you know, in early 1963, called Walk Like a Man. What was the story?
It was done on the same session as Big Girls Don't Cry. Yeah, the only thing with Walk Like a Man was we almost didn't put it out because it was done on an old session. We felt maybe we could do something better, and we went in and recorded, but we didn't come up with anything better, so we released it.
We never did find out if all the guys are from New Jersey.
No, Dimitri's from Maryland.
Montclair, Roseland, and
West Orange?
West Orange.
And Tommy was from, the original season was from Montclair also.
Yeah.
Are all of you married?
Or married. Joe's married. Everybody else is into all kinds of things. It's a very strange situation.
Well, marriage? Yeah, marriage can be strange.
What was the music scene like in 1963 prior to the Beatle British invasion?
That's very difficult. As far as what records were hits at the time, what type of music, I think it was just seemed to be the beginning of vocal groups because of, like you say, the Gene Vincent and Billy Elliot. You know,
I would say that particular area was more like patchwork because we had some artists that had been big in the 50s, late 50s, jumping back with a couple tunes. Now, for instance, Dion came back with Rudy Baby. Presley jumped back in with Return to Sender. And you had this and that and spot records, you know, biggies here and there. Nothing. It wasn't a pattern. Or, you know, what I'm trying to say, for instance, like when Buddy Holly was around, there was a set sound. Say cats like Gene Vincent followed, or the Drifters, they had a certain sound, a length of time. The English thing didn't even come until, 64, I guess it was.
The next release, Ain't That a Shame, was a remake of a Fats Domino oldie. What made the group suddenly shift to this material?
Yeah, lack of something else. It's really that simple. It was the best record we had in the can, and we just didn't have anything else between traveling and so on and so forth. We just didn't have the time.
first release in 1963 was another big-selling original, Candy Girl.
I don't remember that because I didn't write it. No, I think that was Larry Santos that wrote that. Yeah, he came in with it. He didn't have a title, and Bob gave him the title for the song, which I think made a big difference also.
I've been searching on the wide world. Now finally I found mine.
At the end of 1963, the Four Seasons released a Christmas album for VJ, one of the first rock group Christmas albums called The Four Seasons Greetings. What do you remember about it?
Yeah, we did the whole album in 24 hours. It's true. Wow, we were sick for weeks after. It was a big job.
There was one cut called Jungle Bells, which was a change on Jingle Bells. Why was this?
I can't even remember who did that, but it was just a cute idea, I guess. So we decided to give it a shot. We did one side sort of like for the very young kids, and one side a little more legit.
Thus, we come to the close of the first chapter in the golden era of the Four Seasons. We've heard of the early days, the struggles, the joining together of two separate groups, the origination of the group name, the role of producer Bob Crew in their success, and his decision to record a record called Sherry. In the next chapter, we'll discuss the Beatle-British invasion, the Four Seasons move to another label and why, the biggest Four Seasons record, and an experimental album called Born to Wonder. All of this in the year 1964, Chapter 2 in our documentary, as we talk with Bob Gaudio, Joe Long, Dimitri Callis, and Frankie Valli, next on the golden era of the Four Seasons.